Greetings, my dear 1000 PS TV viewers. The Honda NC750X is and remains a bread and butter motorcycle, but that's not meant as an insult when I say that. It's reliable, practical and fuel efficient. However, the new 2025 NC750X can be ridden sportier than many of you might think. And why that is, I'll explain in this video. Yes, Honda's NC750X has some history behind it. You wouldn't think so. It's a relatively unassuming bike. But the NC750X has been in production since 2012, although initially it was the NC700X. Honestly, I think they should rename it from NC to PC because NC stands for New Concept, and maybe it should be called Proven Concept instead. It's a concept that has stood the test of time, unlike some other bikes that were discontinued or even scrapped much earlier. The NC750X has been a strong seller from the start, and even today it regularly ranks among the top 3 best-selling Honda motorcycles. That's clearly something that resonates with customers. And yes, there are good reasons for that. It's not just the everyday usability and practical features, but also, and here I'm going to talk about the engine, this relatively flat-lying inline 2-cylinder engine. Instead of the earlier 680 cubic centimeters from the 700 models, it now has 745 cubic centimeters. It produces 58.6 horsepower at 7,250 revolutions per minute and torque, which, let's be honest, is the more important number, of 69 Newton meters at just 4,750 revolutions per minute. When you look at the specs, and it's also very noticeable in real-world riding, this engine really delivers punch from the low end. It's all about that torque that it wants to show off. That said, the 750 engine now revs out quite decently, I'd say. I've ridden the NC700X before, and I actually had an experience with it that I've never had with any other motorcycle before or since. I hit the rev limiter, and I didn't even really notice it. That says something about the engine. It definitely has its own character and can be revved out. But in my opinion, the true magic of this engine lies in the lower to mid-range revs. And then there's one more thing about this bike that I truly appreciate. During the test rides here in Portugal today, I got to try out the manual gearbox, the standard manual transmission, and honestly I thought, yeah, it's not bad, it's great that I got to try it. It's a gearbox that shifts in a crisp NC750X precise way. I mean, you can really click those gears in with a solid feel, but for me, what truly defines the NC750X is the DCT, the dual clutch transmission. That's Honda's double clutch transmission. I would absolutely pay the extra cost for it just to have that dual clutch system. And I think it's entirely possible that some of you watching might be hearing about the NC750X for the first time and are wondering, what exactly is DCT? So here's a quick explanation. You might already be familiar with dual clutch transmissions from cars with automatic gearboxes. As many of them now use this technology, Honda is the only motorcycle manufacturer that has managed to miniaturize this technology to the point where it fits into a motorcycle. That's no small feat, but the principle is the same. Gears 1, 3 and 5 are on one shaft and use one clutch, while gears 2, 4 and 6 are on another shaft and use another clutch, 6 are on another shaft and use a separate clutch. So when, for example, you're shifting from first to second gear, as soon as the clutch for first gear disengages, the clutch for second gear is already engaged. Then it shifts to third, then fourth, up or down, it doesn't matter. This creates an incredibly smooth and uninterrupted power delivery, which is what makes the DCT so insanely cool and unique. So that's one reason why I say the 2025 NC750X is a truly great all-rounder especially, and I would absolutely pay the extra cost for this with the DCT gearbox. But earlier I also said that the 2025 NC750X can be ridden more sportily. Let's move on to the braking system. And here, for the first time in the 13-year history of the NC750X, we see a dual disc setup. Now, obviously, on many motorcycles, a dual disc setup at the front isn't anything special, but this is the first time for the NC750X. Up until now, the single 310mm disc with a 2-piston caliper worked well. Yeah, it's an entry-level bike, a step-up bike, or even a switchover bike. And I'd say the single disc system was well suited to riders who were less experienced and didn't want to feel overwhelmed. It was designed for customers who might still be gaining confidence. But now, with the dual 296mm discs, each with 2-piston calipers, I have to say, it's simply much sportier to ride. In the case of the NC750X, the single disc was good, but the dual disc setup is definitely better. And for anyone worried that all this talk about the sportier nature of the new NC750X might mean it's no longer for them because it's too sporty, let me list a few reasons why this is still very much a bread and butter motorcycle with excellent all-rounder qualities that make it practical for everyday use. Let me hop on and you'll see. It's super easy for me to get on. The seat height is 802mm, which in my opinion is really low. When I lift the bike upright, even without using my incredible muscle mass to lower the suspension, I can easily get both feet flat on the ground. So I'm standing there normally, no need to tiptoe or anything, and I don't have particularly long legs. This means that shorter riders will find a solid footing on the NC750X, which is important, especially for beginners or entry-level riders who need to feel secure when they stop. With a seat height of just under 800mm, you've got a really low seat height. By the way, there's also a comfort seat available for both rider and passenger, priced at €150 each. I'd say, sure, why not? But for me personally, I wouldn't invest in it because I already find the standard seat comfortable enough. The comfort seat just comes with a new cover and stitching, which Honda says hasn't changed much but gives it a slightly higher quality appearance. Still, I don't feel like I'd need to upgrade. The ergonomics are also interesting. The knee angle works perfectly fine for me. At some point, sure, if you have longer legs, you'll feel the edge of the tank a bit. People in the community have asked me how the NC750X feels for me with my height of 1.90 meters. For both riders and passengers of my size, it works just fine, but the knee position can feel a bit tight. The legs spread out slightly, which you either like or don't. Obviously, the NC750X isn't a super slim bike, but that's not its aim. It's a touring bike, and that's exactly why it's so popular, especially because of its excellent wind protection. Even with the smaller stock windshield, the wind protection is really good. There's also an accessory windshield available for around €400. Not exactly cheap, but it's about 7 centimeters taller and 25 millimeters wider, 12.5 millimeters on each side, and adjustable in 5 positions. I have to say, that's definitely a great upgrade. I think the €400 are worth it if you need a taller screen. The fairing has also been slightly updated for the new NC750X, but I'd say that's probably not the main reason to find the new model better. Yeah, there's a lot of electronics on board, just like with its predecessor. What I find interesting though is that the DCT has been fine-tuned so that starting off should now feel even smoother. And I have to say, for me, it was already really good before, and it still is now. I'd even go as far as to say it's just awesome. It's a system that works so well. With the DCT, you can choose the fully automatic mode, where the electronics handle everything for you. But you can also override it, you can intervene. Using your left hand, with your thumb and index finger, you can shift up or down if you feel the system is too slow. Like before entering a corner, you might want to drop a gear manually because the system doesn't know a corner is coming. That said, I have to admit, during today's ride, it worked incredibly well. The bike always shifted exactly when I needed it to. Obviously, I'd already braked, and the system realized that I probably needed to downshift at that point. What's also very interesting is that there are several riding modes: Sport, Standard, Rain, and even a user mode, where you can configure everything just the way you like. In Sport mode, for example, not only does the throttle response change, but the DCT's shift timing is also adjusted. In Rain mode, it shifts early, while in Sport mode, it holds the revs longer before shifting. It lets the engine rev out. The traction control settings also adjust depending on the mode you select. You can even fine-tune the engine braking, with 3 levels to choose from. And in user mode, you can even disable the traction control entirely. Whether a beginner needs that level of customization is another question, but everything works really well. The electronics, I'd say, are at a level that's truly impressive. It's fantastic to have this available to beginners now. Honestly, when I was younger, I didn't have access to anything like this. You guys are really lucky to have bikes like this at your disposal. Speaking of electronics, there's also a new display, a 5-inch full-color TFT display. In my opinion, it's super easy to read and all the settings are displayed very clearly. For example, you can switch modes with just a single button. The settings, by the way, are controlled with a backlit 4-way key, so to speak. If you want to enter the menu, you just press right and then you can navigate through the options. Once you're in, you can adjust the settings. The riding modes are pre-configured, but for example, the two user modes, let's call them User 1 and User 2, allow you to customize things. You can set the power to full or adjust it in 3 levels. Engine braking, DCT settings, and traction control can all be configured. In User 1, for instance, you can tweak everything, and you can do the same in User 2. Once you're done, you just back out of the menu. Oh, and one more thing. Let me dive back into the menu real quick. You can also choose between 3 different display layouts. Personally, I like the circle layout the most. It's the nicest looking and the easiest to read. But you can also choose the bar layout or the very simple one. The fact that it's a full-color TFT display now, paired with the backlit 4-way key, is really something I think beginners will absolutely appreciate. As for the suspension, it has a 41mm conventional fork at the front and a monoshock at the rear. I'd say it leans more toward the comfortable side, which is exactly what I want from a touring motorcycle. And it's perfect for beginners too. But at the same time, it's not so soft that it feels too spongy. And when it comes to the weight and handling, the standard manually shifted version weighs 216 kilos. With the DCT, you're adding 10 extra kilos. So 216 to 226 kilos in ready-to-ride condition with the 14.1-liter fuel tank. But honestly, those 10 kilos are absolutely worth it for the DCT. And above all, it's all positioned in a way that's very favorable to the bike's center of gravity. I don't really notice the weight much when it comes to handling. It feels good. The tires also play a role here. 120/70-17 at the front and 160/60-17 at the rear. So 17-inch wheels all around, and at the rear, there's even a narrow 160 tire. That's great for handling, such a narrow rear tire, and they're confident enough to go with it. They didn't feel the need to throw on a massive 180 rear tire. Now about practical features. Aside from the fact that the bike has this adventurous look and works so well for touring, let me show you something. I'll take out the key, not just for fun, but to show you something. I stick it into the compartment here, turn it to the right, and some of you might already know this, but maybe some of you don't. I have a helmet compartment. Yes, I've got a helmet compartment, but I'll tell you right away, you'll need to check if your helmet fits. Maybe it's better to buy the NC750X first and then find the right helmet afterward. For example, I tried my Nolan N80-8. I thought, that's a compact helmet, it should fit, but the rear spoiler was enough to prevent it from fully fitting inside. I could slide it in, but I'd have to leave the lid open. It wouldn't close completely. So yes, a full face helmet does fit, but it depends on the model. Others have managed to fit their helmets. I don't remember exactly which ones, but mine, for example, didn't fit. So you just need to figure out which helmet works. Nolan has other models, of course, so you can always try one that fits. Anyway, these are the little things that explain why the NC750X is so popular. And from my perspective, the 2025 model is definitely the best one yet, and I'm sure it'll be even more popular because of the updates I've mentioned. The dual disc brake setup at the front makes total sense. But now let's talk about what the NC750X can't do, or rather, what you might expect it to do, but it doesn't. Well, I mean, looking at the rugged off-road inspired design, with the X in its name, you might assume it's built for off-road riding. But no, as I've said before, the 120mm front and rear suspension travel, combined with the 17-inch wheels, 120 at the front and 160 at the rear, are really just standard naked bike specs. It's not an off-road bike, even though it might look like one. That being said, the seating position and ergonomics, the reach to the handlebars and everything are super comfortable. This means you can ride a gravel road on the North Carolina 750X without any problem. The upright seating position is almost reminiscent of a supermoto. So, now we're getting close to the end, but I want to quickly talk about the prices. I know the Austrian price exactly, but I won't go out on a limb for the others since I'm not entirely sure. German prices are usually a bit cheaper, while Swiss prices are a bit higher. I do know how much extra the DCT costs in Switzerland though. In Austria, the manual NC750X is priced at 8,590 euros, while the DCT version is 9,590 euros. So it's a difference of 1,000 euros for the DCT gearbox, and yes, for me, it's absolutely worth it. In Switzerland, it's a bit more expensive in francs, I think just under 10,500 Swiss francs. The DCT costs an additional 1,200 Swiss francs there, but even that would still be worth it to me. I can only recommend the DCT because it's genuinely amazing. You can also select a fully manual mode on the DCT that lets you rev out every gear to the limiter if you want. And since there's no clutch lever, it's impossible for the bike to stall. For example, if you roll up to a traffic light in 6th gear, the bike automatically shifts down to 1st, so you can ride off without frying the clutch. The system is incredibly smart. The electronics overall are super advanced in my opinion, and everything works together beautifully. The suspension, the handling, everything is at a level where I'd say yes, it's designed not to intimidate beginners or first-time riders, and it succeeds in doing that. And the dual disc brakes at the front are a really smart move by Honda because they also provide a lot of value for more experienced riders. Thank you for sticking with me and listening to what I had to say about the 2025 NC750X. I hope you found it interesting and took it all in. Don't forget to subscribe to our 1000 PS YouTube channel. By the way, I wasn't just in Portugal to test the NC750X. I was also here to check out the new Transalp. Thanks again for watching and listening. Hope to see you next time.